So welcome to Scene and Solve, presented by Hubbard-Hall. I'm Tim Pennington, editor of Finishing and Coating. And today we're talking with actually a new face in the industry, Jameson Grout from Hubbard-Hall.
You're listening to the Scene and Solve podcast, brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. Better results, less chemistry.
So Jameson, you've been out in the field looking at some issues some shops are having, such as with black oxide. Tell us a couple horror stories, if you could. Give us a scene and give us a definitely solved.
Okay, I'll give you a weird scene. This was a few years back, but I responded to a call at a black oxide account. It was firearm stuff, and it was actually a cleaning issue that they were calling us about. And I came in and I was looking around at things, and I noticed that the black oxide tank was sputtering like crazy. It was like spitting out little globs of caustic. It was all over the floor. The operators even had little bites all over their arms. And I was like, man, this isn't right. So I was looking at it, and it's boiling too aggressively at 285. So I'm talking to them, and I'm like, why are you guys boiling this so aggressively? You should get some salts in there. Let's get it nice and gently rolling. And they say, oh, we can't do that, because if we let it calm down a little bit, we'll start getting spots on the parts. This is the only way to keep the spots off. So I was like, well, I want to see these spots, right? So put some salt in. We brought the boiling point back up. And basically what had happened was they had delayed the desludging so long. They had all this sludge on the bottom, and it was starting to kind of float around and sit on the parts. So they got the bath boiling more violently so that the sludge could never actually sit on the parts long enough to cause any problems. So the parts are looking great. But meanwhile, there's caustic all over the floor, and it was scary to be around. So we ended up talking some black oxide good practices while I was there. And
how long have they been doing? They just thought that was a great idea to keep doing it that way? Is that what they...
Yeah, it's just a lack of knowledge. They tried letting it get a little more aggressive to stop the spots from forming, and it worked, and they kept rolling with it.
Now, I don't know if that particular situation, you got the call for the cleaning. It didn't have probably anything to do with the cleaning, but any other situations where you got called in for one reason, it turned out to be a completely separate reason of what was causing the issues, or?
Yeah, I'm sure that kind of stuff happens all the time where you come in and you see something else. One thing that I did want to talk about that I failed to earlier is dry down. It's a failure mode that you really don't hear too much in plating. You'll hear about drying stains and stuff like that, but dry down is this kind of phenomena in conversion coatings. You see it in some phosphates too, where you're coming out of this 285 degree solution and you're coming into cold air, and that caustic will dry on. And you'll see that it'll come out black and it'll start to turn brown just right in the air, and it won't rinse off. Sometimes you'll feel it. It'll be like a smut. They call it rub off, brown rub off, a few different names for it. So I was responding to another gun manufacturer. They're having a lot of problems with this specific barrel. I don't know what it was for, but it had a thicker wall on the barrel than most things. And that meant, it was dissipating heat quicker when it was coming through the air. And so they were getting more dry down just on those. And once again, it was only at the tips. It was just dissipating quickly at the tips. So what we ended up doing is actually installing a mist sprayer. So it was automatic line. It would automatically kick on, and the parts would come through the mist, and it would just help cool it off. So by the time they got to the rinse tank, nothing was drying on. And that was a big win. They kept it for their whole process. It actually helped their chemical regulation over time because it was adding back just enough water.
Wow, interesting. And anything else? Any other type of stories like that of left them scratching their heads until you kind of saw it?
So we're talking about aluminum and how you get, it's usually blisters with aluminum. That's normally the failure mode. And it normally is tied to that Zincate drag-in. That Zincate, it's a cool idea in general. You're kind of tricking the part into thinking something's there. So the aluminum doesn't really question anything. But I had this one customer who would consistently get blisters around 3 metal turnovers. So what they did was they put a line in the sand, and they said 2 MTOs, that's when we dump our bath. And they actually started using it as a marketing tool for their customers. They're telling their customers, look, guys, we care about your quality so much. We're going to eat some cost on this bath, and we're going to dump at 2, so there's never any problems. But your competitors aren't. They're going to push the limits, and they may see some blistering and porosity issues, this and that. And they did that for a few years. It was kind of a clever idea. And then they called me up, and they're like, okay, we can't afford this anymore. We need more bath life out of this, right? So I came in and I was looking at things, and it turns out it was just too much Zincate they had. There's kind of an art to Zincating, and you really want to minimize it. We actually do this thing called a double Zincate. You do your normal prep, your deox and everything. You go in the first Zincate, and it's like 30 seconds to a minute. You come out, you strip it normally in like 50% nitric or something. Then you go back into the Zincate for shorter, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. So the Zincate crystals are closer together. They're a little smaller. So like the weight of that coating is less. So you drag less in. But basically these guys were staying in for a full minute the second time. So they had this really dark gray Zincate both times. So I was explaining to them, you really don't need that. We cut that back to like 15, 20 seconds. And although it didn't look as pretty, it wasn't, as nice matte gray. Going in, they were getting 3.5, 4.5 turns on the bath. So 6 months later, they're telling their customers, we dumped the bath at 3 MTOs because we care. And so, bought them another 50%, and they still got to keep the marketing hook.
Keep the marketing campaign. You don't want to get rid of the marketing campaign. All right, that's pretty interesting. Jameson, thanks for joining us today, and I'm sure you're going to be joining us many times going ahead in the future now that you're with Hubbard-Hall. So I very much appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
The Scene in South podcast is brought to you by Hubbard-Hall. For more podcasts, visit hubbardhall.com or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe, rate and review, and join us on social media. Produced by Awcast.